Yo, what up? I'm Josh from Budget Church Live Streaming. Today I'm going to run through the gear that we use at OKC Community Church for our live stream. Now keep in mind, this gear we've accumulated over the course of about 3 years, so we didn't buy it all at once and we definitely didn't buy it sequentially. We're also in a position right now where we don't actually own the space that we have church in. We actually meet in a theater right next door to our church building. So that means every Sunday morning we have to cart everything over and set it up and tear it down. And that's informed a few of the decisions we've made. You'll see that as we dig deeper into it. Now, your church may have extremely different needs than ours does, so use this as a jumping off point rather than a set of equipment that I'm telling you to go buy right now. Before we look at the gear, let's take a look at some clips from some of our recent Sunday mornings so you can have an idea of what our live stream actually looks like with the gear that we have. If you're not interested in that, feel free to skip ahead until I start talking again. Here we go.
John is standing at the foot of the cross. And honestly, this moment, when you think about it, is pretty striking. Just Jesus is hanging on the cross. And here he is, and he's taking care of his mother. He's taking care of the oldest son responsibilities and affairs hanging on the cross.
All right, so let's take a look at the gear, starting with the cameras, moving all the way through the switcher until we finally actually start streaming. So for cameras, we use 4 Panasonic G85s. The G85 has a micro four thirds sensor and is pretty inexpensive. You can usually find them used on eBay for about $500. We've been pretty happy with how these cameras have performed, with our main gripe being the sensor size. We operate in a pretty dark room, and so sometimes our cameras can kind of struggle to pick up enough light to make sure the image looks clear. The micro four thirds sensor has actually been a benefit to us in some ways though, because we're able to put our cameras farther away from the stage due to the crop factor on the sensor. We also have speed boosters on a couple of them, which allows us to adapt EF lenses, so more expensive Canon style lenses, to use on these cameras. This has been awesome, allowing us to invest in more expensive and nicer glass to put on our cameras without having to upgrade the bodies themselves. But it also gives us room down the road to upgrade to a body that has an EF mount or something more like that and not have to buy brand new lenses to use with it. I don't necessarily want to lock us into this micro four thirds ecosystem, and so using these speed boosters has been an inexpensive way to let us upgrade to nicer glass without boxing us in. I plan to get a couple more speed boosters to put on our other 2 cameras eventually, but we'll just have to wait for the budget to allow for that. Each of our cameras also has one of these cheapo monitors on top. Now, they're not going to win any awards for their color accuracy or fancy settings that they have, but they are a way better option than the tiny flip out screen for finding your focus and framing your shots. Honestly, getting those was a game changer, and I could tell immediately that our volunteers were having an easier time finding focus on their shots. Now on the back of the monitors are our homemade tally lights. Tally lights are a visual way to let a camera operator know if they're currently live. The light will go green when they're in preview and red when they get switched to program. This is really nice because the director might tell them they're live, but sometimes they're live for a long time and they don't want to have to ask, am I still live? They can just check their light and know that it's right. I'll make a separate video talking about how I made these. They're super easy and super cheap, and honestly a game changer. Finally, all of our cameras need an HDMI to SDI adapter. Because they only have HDMI outputs, we need to convert to SDI in order to run our cameras all the way back to our switcher. We don't use any wireless cams, so some of these runs are about 150 to 200 feet. That's obviously too long for HDMI, so we use these Blackmagic microconverters. We've been pretty happy with these. We've had a few die on us, but honestly for about 50 bucks a pop, I'm okay with it. We've got 4 cameras on a Sunday morning. Camera 1 is in the back corner of the room, and it's actually used for the tight shots on whoever's leading the song or the speaker during the sermon. Camera 2 is about mid-level, and it's actually on our dolly system, going left and right during the worship, and it goes static during the sermon. That's used for more wide shots and also for secondary close-ups, depending on what's going on in the moment. Camera 3 is on stage up by the drum set and covers anyone on the drums or the bass, and sometimes some shots of vocalists across the front of the row. And then finally, we've got camera 4. That one's on the other side of the stage from the drums, and it captures the electric guitar, the keys, the acoustic guitar, and really anything that's happening on that side of the stage. Cameras 3 and 4 are up there for worship, but during the sermon they just come back to the booth and then sit in church. All of our cameras use the same exact gear, but they might be rigged up a little bit differently depending on where they are. For example, camera 1 is on a tripod, and so I keep everything on a cage on the camera itself. That way it can just be clipped on and off the tripod and not have to worry about anything else. Camera 2 is on this dolly, and so we actually put some of the accessories on the dolly to keep the camera nice and light. Cameras 3 and 4 are handheld, and we used to keep things on a cage, but they got really heavy for our volunteers, so we came up with something different. We have these belt packs that they can wear that actually hold the accessories for their cameras. That allows them to just hold the camera itself, which is much lighter and just much easier to get around with. Our cameras themselves are powered off of the internal batteries, but the monitor, tele light, and microconverter are actually powered off of a separate V-mount battery. This allows us to make sure that our battery life will last as long as we possibly need it and only have to change out 2 batteries if they die. We actually tried having the cameras powered by the V-mount battery as well, but they gave us some warnings about the voltage that were applied to them, and so it ended up being more trouble than it was worth. Your mileage may vary with that though, so it might be worth giving it a try. For communication between all of our camera ops and director, we use the Eartec Ultralight headsets, which are not amazing, but they've worked really great for us for the past 3 years. The volume doesn't get super loud, and honestly, the audio quality is not perfect, especially when you're on stage. But for a church our size and what we're doing, I don't really have any major complaints. I've also managed to find a way to record the audio coming out of the hub so that we can use it for training and other things later. I'll make a video about that coming up, so if you want to see that, hit that like button. All the cables from the cameras make their way to the back of the room where we have our mobile booth. In here, we use the ATEM 2ME Constellation HD, which is one of Blackmagic's more recent releases. This bad boy has 20 SDI inputs and 12 SDI outputs. So honestly, it's way overkill for what we're doing, but we have so much room to grow into it. I'm so excited to see how long this lasts us because it's been a great investment. At $1,700, I feel like this is actually perfectly priced for a lot of different churches and is well worth exploring if you're looking for a new switcher. We also send a feed from ProPresenter into our switcher. This comes over just an HDMI cable because we're not that far away from the computer. We transform the feed in the ATEM for lower thirds lyrics during worship, but then we'll keep it full screen for some moments during the sermon, whether we're playing a video or we just want some full screen slides. We also have a super source set up with our pastor on one side and our slides on the other side. That way, if we need to do a side-by-side during the sermon, if he's going over a graphic or something like that, it's really easy for us to do with just one push of a button. Now, the way our room is set up, we don't really need iMag, but we do still make use of that second mix effect on our switcher. We use it to create a clean feed out of the switcher. Now, ATEM switchers can do a clean feed automatically, but they only work with downstream keys and not upstream keys, which is what we need to use for our lyrics. So we found a hacky way to set up the 2 mix effects to be able to switch both of them at the same time, one with lyrics, one without. We like to use the clean feed for social media posts and other things. That way, in case we cut to a super source or something during the moment, we don't have that on our final recording, and we can use that more easily on social media. Same with worship. If we cut a clip out for social media, we don't really want the lyrics at the bottom, so we keep that clean. Like I said, it's set up in kind of a funny way, but it's worked for us and has been really nice to have. Audio is coming into our system via a mix bus on our soundboard. I mentioned before that we don't own our space, and part of that is not owning our soundboard either. That's kept us from doing too much with our audio, unfortunately, such as creating an actual separate broadcast mix, so we do the best that we can. We have a post-fader mix that's actually just sent out of the soundboard into this little mixer here. From there, we have somebody monitoring it with headphones, and they're actually able to adjust the mix live using the Yamaha Stage Mix app. From there, it goes directly into our ATEM switcher. This isn't ideal, but it's been okay for us. We know that when we get our own space, that's one of the first things that we're going to solve, is making sure that we have a dedicated mix going to our live stream. However, at this point, we just do what we can with what we have. That's all of the signals actually coming into our switcher. Let's keep moving. Up here, we have a giant screen for our multi-view. It's an old 55-inch TV out of my living room. Now, let me be clear, we do not use this for color accuracy. Realistically, that's not something I'm that interested in our church. Because we're in a theater that we don't control, our lights are kind of different every week anyway, and so trying to make things too color accurate is honestly just an uphill battle. What I do care about is that every camera looks consistent with each other and that our shots are in focus. And honestly, having this big screen is great for that. We stand pretty close to it, so at this distance, I wouldn't go any bigger than 55 inches, but it's been awesome having it versus just the tiny computer monitor we were using before. We looked into a lot of options for our director to actually do the switching, and honestly, the best option for us is something you might be familiar with, which is using a Stream Deck connected to our ATEM through BitFocus Companion. Companion is a little piece of software that runs on a computer that actually connects your Stream Deck to pieces of hardware on your network. This means that we can program in buttons on our little Stream Deck here that can control our switcher and other pieces of equipment on our network. Now, we actually have Companion running on a Raspberry Pi, which is just a tiny little computer. It's about $50. These are awesome for single-purpose computers, such as something that needs to run Companion. It's been solid for us and just powers on automatically when we turn on the cart. It also doesn't take up any room in our cart and we never have to turn anything on. It's just there and it works. It's great. Like I said, Companion works over the network. It doesn't connect directly to your ATEM switcher. So that brings me to our network. Like I said, shared space. They give us a network drop that we're able to use for our stream. Now, I'm going to need more than one network drop because I have other devices to connect. Not to mention the tally lights that we have run over Wi-Fi. I don't really want to have to use their Wi-Fi network. I don't know what else is running on it, and I don't have control over the settings or configuration. I actually plug our own router and switch into the access port that they give us. This allows me to create my own isolated network for everything livestream related. This has a bunch of advantages. For one, it lets me control all of the settings and permissions and securities and make sure that nothing is ever a problem on our network. Two, it lets me keep people off of our network a little bit more easily because I know what the security settings are. So I know that there's not somebody else out there using it. And three, it means that we can move this whole setup somewhere else, plug in, and everything will just work because they get their IP addresses from my network, not from the shared network here. If you don't have your own dedicated network for all of your tech stuff, you definitely should. It has so many advantages and is not that hard to set up. I'll probably make a video about that soon. Okay, so now we're switching our video on the ATEM constellation, but what's the rest of the signal flow? How are we getting to the internet? Well, we're actually making use of a second switcher, the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. That's right, I've daisy chained a second switcher into this setup, and I'll show you why. It gives us kind of this second layer between our video switching and things actually going out to YouTube. So imagine this, we're 5 minutes before we need to start our service. We're already live on YouTube with a pre-show, but we need to test things out on our switcher and make sure everything's good in the room. Well, I can do that because the switcher feed is going into the ATEM Mini, but the ATEM Mini is actually broadcasting a different one of its inputs. This gives us flexibility to do things on the switcher that don't have to go out to the internet. It's pretty nice having that separation. So if we look at the ATEM Mini, here are the signals we're sending into it. We've got 3 feeds from our ATEM constellation going into the ATEM Mini. We've got the program feed, we've got the clean feed that we talked about, and we also have the multi-view. I'll get to that in a second. Our 4th signal is actually from this laptop over here. This laptop is running OBS as kind of a video player. We can load up videos in here that we want just sent to our stream and play them in OBS, and it will play on this input in our ATEM Mini. We use this to play our pre-roll video. Because the ATEM switchers don't allow you to load videos in, you need some other way to play videos. This is the most inexpensive way I could find, running on an old laptop that was just literally sitting in a closet. It doesn't take much hardware to run something like this, so it's been great for us. You can also control OBS through Companion, so I can actually create macros that automatically queue up the videos whenever I need them to. Finally, we also have a thumbnail loaded up in the media pool. This is nice for us to have just to put up initially before we actually start the pre-show. Like I was talking about before, because the ATEM Mini is also hooked up on our network, it means everything on it can be controlled through Companion, the same as our ATEM constellation. This actually lets me do super cool things where I can chain multiple events on one button press. For example, let's look at the start of our Sunday morning flow. We click this one button to actually start the stream on our ATEM. After that's going, we have a scheduled task that automatically starts our pre-service video a few minutes before we want our service to start. We don't always start our service at the exact same time, so we do have to manually switch over to our program feed, but having a little bit of this automated is still super nice for us. Once it hits 10:30, our service time, and we start welcoming on the stage, we hit the program button, and that does a few different things. One is it will automatically fade into our program input coming from our main switcher. 2, it will mute all the other channels and pull up the volume from that program feed. And 3, it'll stop the video playing in OBS just so it's not distracting or using up any other computer resources. We could have it do a lot more than this, but honestly, we just don't really need to. But this is the power of Companion. Again, I'm going to make a whole video about it and things that you can do with it to make your live stream way smoother, but it's been great for us. Now, the keen-eared among you might have noticed that I said we have the ATEM Mini Pro ISO and not just the Mini Pro. Why did I pay the extra $200? Well, like I said, we like to record the clean feed of our services so that we can use them on social media. Well, how do I get that recording if I'm streaming the version with the lyrics and everything else? Well, that's where the ISO comes in. It can actually record every single input coming into it. So that means after our Sunday service, on our SSD that's plugged into it, I have the program feed, I have the clean feed, I have the multi-view, and I actually have the videos from OBS, but I don't need that. That's just garbage. I have everything I need for social media posts, training, or backups, or whatever else, all from one device. Now, could we get a better quality stream or a higher bitrate recording if we used individual hardware devices for the streaming and for the recording and split all that up? Sure, probably. But could I do all of that for just $500 and the push of one button? I don't think so. And after all, this channel is called Budget Church Live Streaming, not spend as much money as you possibly can church live streaming, so we make do with what we have. Speaking of Budget Church Live Streaming, how much did all of this cost? That's kind of a hard question to answer because we've bought it incrementally over the past 3 years. We've sold stuff, we've traded stuff, we've bought things used, etc., etc. But totaling up all of the gear we actually have now and use on a weekly basis, my estimate is approximately $10,000. Keep in mind, that doesn't include things like our front of house mixer or our ProPresenter computer or the TV that I brought from my house after we got a new one, all those random little things. But the cameras, the switchers, the cables, the headsets, the main parts of our live stream and the actual broadcast, that's all included in that $10,000 price point. Obviously, that is a significant sum of money, but when you look at what some people are spending on their live streams, it's really not much. And I feel like our live stream looks pretty good, though I might be a little bit biased. Plus, setups like this are super fun. You get to take pride in the fact that you've built something out of nothing and really worked hard to keep it at a price point that's not exorbitant. That allows us to use funds for all sorts of other things for our church without having to allocate quite so much to our tech team. We've tried a lot of different things to get to the point where we're at now, and we'll probably change more things tomorrow. Just because we're doing something a certain way doesn't mean that that's right for everybody and doesn't mean that it's right for you. But I hope that this has given you some ideas on how to build out your live stream in a budget conscious way and maybe answered some questions that you had about how things work together. If you're still looking for some help, leave a comment, reach out on social media, fill out the form down below to have me review your live stream. Whatever you need, I'd like to help you make your live stream better and really just help you reach more people for Christ. Until next time.